right, good morning. Thank you so much to everyone for being with us today. Thank you to the Wired Center for organizing this and to Abraham for moderating, my co-panelists. Nice to meet you. So what I'd like to do today is to share some of the work that we've been doing at our research lab at the University of Regina. And I want to touch on themes of power, disaster, and social inequity, which is really what our research is all about. So when I say power, as I'll get to, we think about power in multiple ways, not just electrical, what's been discussed largely here, but also power in the sense of power relationships between people. So I should introduce myself. My apologies. My name is Fletcher. I'm a professor in the Department of Sociology and Social Studies at the University of Regina. I'm also the academic director of the Community Engagement and Research Center, also at the U of R. So I'll tell you a bit about the work that we are doing at the Gender, Environment, and Social Inequity Research Lab, long name, GENSOL for short. Abraham is also the co-director of the lab together with me. We are a group of social science researchers who conduct primarily community-engaged research. And what that means is that we all focus on building relationships with communities. So going back to what Dr. Kincaid was saying, it's about building relationships with community organizations, grassroots groups, sometimes individual community members, for the purpose of conducting research that is informed by what communities need and want. And the hope is that we can develop research that really meets a need, so is connected to what the community members want to know. It's meant to be reciprocal, and it's also meant to be kind. So I convinced Adela to go first today because I thought that was such a good framing for our conversation going forward. So, our research touches on various topics related to gender, environment, social inequity, but in particular as it relates to climate disasters. So we look at the impacts of flooding, wildfire, drought, excuse me, on community members, but also looking at differences within communities. So one of the things we often hear is communities are affected. Yes, communities are affected, but not everyone within the community is affected the same. So we're very interested in looking at diversity, diverse impacts of disasters within communities to get a sense of how communities can respond using their inherent agency. So this is the work we do. I'll talk a little bit about 3 projects, one of which is complete, 2 of which are planned, which I think really connect to the themes of the Wired Center. The first, which I've grayed out because it is complete, was a project that looks at those impacts. It looks at the impacts of wildfire, flooding, drought, with a focus on how community members respond and are affected. So we didn't go into this project looking at the loss of power. It was actually not one of our focus areas for this, but it came up. Community members talked about the impacts of power loss during floods and extreme snowfall events, and they talked about how that impacted them and how they coped. So I'll come back to that in just a few moments. The other 2 projects are planned. So these 2 projects are looking at shifting away from the impact side of power loss and going more toward the production, the generation side, but still with a focus on social relations of power, inequity, and diversity, excuse me. So these two projects, the first is looking at how people employed in the coal sector, which in Saskatchewan, coal still provides a significant amount of our power. So how do people working in the coal sector whose livelihoods are dependent on coal understand risk? How do they conceptualize risks to their livelihood caused by climate impacts? But also, how do they conceptualize risks as the rest of the world starts to shift away from coal? The second project looks at gender-based violence. So in the midst of the boom and bust economies that are so common with resource-heavy communities, resource-intensive communities, we do see from other research, it's a very developing body of research, but what we do see is that unfortunately, gender-based violence, domestic violence, tends to spike with shifts in the economy. So in boom and bust resource extractive industries, when there's job loss, when there's recessions and economic stressors, that causes stressors that lead to increased violence. So this is one of the things we're planning to work with women's shelters in particular, to understand what they feel and what they know. So as Abraham said, this work is different. It's different than what we've heard at the conference so far, but I think this work is very much about power. It's about social relationships of power, the privilege, the relationships of inequity and domination that sometimes shape how people experience a disaster, but also how people access power or don't access power. So just as one example, we heard from in one of the communities, some people had the financial resources to be able to purchase a generator. So they were good. They could generate power, they were okay. Others went without power for days. So something as simple as socioeconomic status has a huge impact in how people access power or if they don't. As I mentioned, we're also shifting toward generation of power, looking at social relations, how things like identity, livelihood impact the production of power, especially in the coal industry. And then as a third way of looking at power, we also look at the power that communities have. So again, sometimes communities are presented as just vulnerable, victims, affected, impacted. But communities have valuable knowledge. They have inherent local knowledge, traditional knowledge, and they know how to manage their land, their forests, their water. And so I think when we start to recognize the knowledge that people have that can contribute, perhaps not in the moment of a disaster response, because obviously there's urgency, but if we could engage in proactive participatory planning that includes, recognizes, and values the knowledge that communities have, I think that can go a long way toward ensuring that that knowledge is recognized and perhaps more beneficial responses to disaster and to disaster-related power losses. To that end, I would like to conclude with a quote, so a bit of a story as well. This is a story that was shared with us by an Indigenous elder in one of the communities with whom we worked. This community had experienced several days of power loss due to flooding, also due to an extreme snowfall event that happened earlier that year. And the elder talked about the knowledge. I think this story is really about that. It's about that agency, that knowledge that people have to respond, and that they know what to do. So the elder told us about how the power went out, and the youth, the young people, they were lost. They didn't know what to do. They started walking in the flood because they were trying to find power. But the old ones knew what to do. So the elder, he had a barbecue, he had a bus that he used to pick people up, to keep them warm. It was still spring, it was cold. Some of the other elders told us about building fires to cook and teaching the youth how to cook with those fires as well. So community members know, they have the knowledge, they have the ability to respond, and so often in our research what we hear is our knowledge wasn't recognized. We knew we had equipment, we understand the land, we know what to do, but nobody was listening to us. They just wanted to evacuate us. So I share this story because I think it shows the power that communities have and their resiliency if we recognize what they know and the importance of their local knowledge. So I hope we can talk about this more in the discussion today. I would just like to say thank you so much to all of you for listening and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, all. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. And I'm going to talk about workforce issues. And as mentioned before, workforce and workers are an important part of our community. And creating the opportunities is really important as we move forward in terms of building a resilient society. And again, a little bit about me. My name is Channa Prera. I'm Vice President of Regulatory and Indigenous Affairs at Electricity Canada. So who is Electricity Canada? We were established way back in 1891, and we're 134 years old. And I've been there 25 of those years. And we represent all of the large electricity generation, transmission, and distribution companies across the country. And we have members from all provinces and territories. And a lot of these members are now working hard to find the right talent to meet our clean energy transition. And it is not an easy one. And our members are looking at increasing demand for electricity with electrification of transportation and other things. And finding the right workers is not easy, as you will find out in my remarks. So in terms of building that resilient workforce, Canada needs a highly skilled and resilient workforce to meet our climate and clean energy goals. In a study that was done by Electricity Human Resources Canada, they estimated that we need 28,000 new electricity sector workers by end of 2028, which is less than 2.5 years to go. And that is just to replace retiring staff and meet expansion demands. And I would say since the study was done, there have been other estimates out there as well. If you look at Hydro-Quebec, for example, and their long-term or short-term growth plans, they would need 30,000 construction workers alone over the next 5 years. So the entire world is looking at addressing climate change, implementing or adopting new technologies, and we need highly skilled workers in order to meet this increase in demand. And then the transition, as I said, demands not just workers, but new skills. We need workers who can work in with digital technologies. We need people to work on information communication technologies. We need mechanical, electrical engineers, people who understand AI and other new emerging technologies. And so having that skilled workforce is important. And that the most fundamental thing is we must align our climate change goals with our workforce strategy. And that needs to happen now. So what are some of the key challenges? One of the things that we have identified is there is no standardized collaborative approach to labor market forecasting. There is no collaboration between industry and other institutions to ensure that we have the right labor market model to forecast the requirements that we have in industry. So that's one of the main challenges that we have. And then another issue for the industry is ensuring that the economic regulators provincially are looking at labor considerations when they make decisions on electricity rates, because the rate that they approve on an annual basis or under a 5-year plan, whatever the case may be, should look at the implications of labor and ensuring that they allocate enough funding for us to hire highly skilled workers and also to train our existing employees and give them the tools necessary to make our industry resilient. And then on the training and institution side of things, curriculum reform is extremely important. Sometimes it can take 3 to 5 or more years to change the curriculum, but we need that done more rapidly. Then we have co-op models, and many of these co-op models are misaligned with the requirements of electricity sector company, and even the time when students come in to the workforce. Sometimes they don't align with the needs of the employees. So that needs to be looked at. And we need to enhance that collaboration between academia and industry as well, and that remains a challenge at the moment. And then in terms of labor mobility, barriers for apprentices and mid-career workers continue to exist. And then maybe touching on the equity support, it is really important that we also look at wraparound support for workers, including childcare, mentoring, and so forth. And those programs at the moment are underdeveloped. And then there are also opportunities. There are proven models that we can scale. We do know that there are modular and micro-credential training that support rapid upskilling and reskilling of workers. And universities and colleges have done a great job. I've had a chance to work with some of the universities and colleges when we first looked at micro-credentialing as an option. And so that needs to be further scaled. We can also look at co-developing programs between industry and the education sector. And then there are also dual-track youth programs that link secondary and post-secondary schools related to trades. And there is a program in Ontario, the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program, that enables students to earn high school credits by taking post-secondary courses, and so further opening their perspectives and opening their eyes in terms of potential career path. And then there is an increased appetite to collaborate and to develop a new structure and sustained leadership in terms of that industry-academia collaboration. And there is an opportunity, given that shared interest, to align governance models and government, industry, and academia working together on this important issue of workforce planning. And on the part of Electricity Canada, we are already engaged in some of these institutions and leaders in the field to discuss what can be done together to collaborate so that we can achieve that resilient workforce and achieve our climate change and clean energy goals. And then another more fundamental thing that we need to look at is to align workforce strategy with our industrial strategy. We keep talking about clean growth and climate change, but we don't talk about workforce. And that is more of an afterthought after we get to those targets. But that needs to be aligned. We need to tie in workforce planning to GDP and housing and other things. And then position Canada as a global leader as well. we should be looking and benchmarking our performance, our programming against international models in other countries, such as the United States and some of the European countries, and perhaps make electricity workforce strategy a key pillar of Canada's climate leadership. I would spend another 2 minutes, if I can, in terms of what needs to happen now. We again launch a national workforce strategy that is aligned with our industrial policy, encourage industry education collaboration, as I mentioned earlier, tie federal investments to support workforce innovation and inclusion, and expand fast-track training models. And finally, in terms of Electricity Canada, as I mentioned earlier, we continue to work with sector stakeholders to advocate for better alignment in workforce development and industrial strategy, continue to advocate with governments on that, and going forward, we'll be partnering with our institutional leaders as well. And we have also launched 2 programs. One is Electricity Fundamentals in Canada, which is an online bilingual course that you can take. It is free of charge for Indigenous communities, but for others, there is a small fee of $200, but it provides the fundamentals of electricity. And then in terms of curriculum planning and helping our teachers in our schools, we also launch a grade 9-10 curriculum, which has 6 modules, 13 lessons, linking electricity, climate, and career pathways. I'll stop there, and thank you very much, and looking forward to the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you. My name's Adela Kincaid. I work here at the University of Calgary. I'm an assistant professor in International Indigenous Studies. And so I'm the teaching stream. So I teach in the program. Typically there are maybe about half students in the program and in my classes are Indigenous and the other half are non-Indigenous. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you and having a little bit of a discussion and sharing more around what I do. Oh, you want me to start with the slides? Perfect. Okay, well, I'll start with the slides. Wonderful. Okay, so my talk will be, I'll be talking about parallel paths. I titled my talk Parallel Paths, and the reason for that is because the Indigenous strategy here at the University of Calgary is called Parallel Paths. So walking together in a good way. And I have 7 minutes, so I'll breeze through a little bit here. I think you've heard the land acknowledgement earlier, so maybe I'll just touch on it again without reading it to you. I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I should also add, I'm a non-Indigenous scholar who teaches in Indigenous studies. I wanted to add a little bit and talk to you a little bit about who the nations are on this territory here. So you see in the land acknowledgement here that the peoples of Treaty 7 include the Blackfoot Confederacy. And so that's comprised of the Siksika Nation, the Piikani Nation, and the Kainai Nation. And so with all of you in mind and the work that you do, I'm hoping I think there might be some interest in working with Indigenous communities. And so that's how I'll position this talk. So Siksika Nation is a First Nation here that's just east of the city of Calgary. I'll just give you a little bit of information around this. Piikani, they're towards Lethbridge. So if you go towards Lethbridge, then you'd find Piikani Nation there, and they're also North Pagan. And then Kainai, or Kainawa, is also the Blood Tribe, and so they're the largest reserve geographically in Canada, and that would be if you were going from Lethbridge towards the mountains, so towards the west from Lethbridge. So those, and also in the States, actually, if you keep going, Amskapi Piikani is also part of the Blackfoot Confederacy. And then Tsuut'ina is a nation right here in Calgary, and so you might have seen signs or reference to Tsuut'ina. And Tsuut'ina means many people or beaver people, and they are Dene Athabaskan, and they speak the Athabaskan language. And then the Stoney Nakoda, which some of you I heard are going to Banff tomorrow, so you'll actually be driving through Stoney Nakoda on your way. So keep an eye out. They're the Yarhe Nakoda people, or mountain people, and they share Sioux and Assiniboine linguistic roots, but are a separate group. I think it's really important to point some of this out so that you know which territories you're on, but also it's important to see the differences between the First Nations so that, it's not falling under this umbrella of Indigenous peoples as one. There are very distinct nations with different cultures, languages, etc. Okay, so I'll quickly touch on this and then maybe we can come back to it in our discussion. Just very quickly, when you're working with First Nations, trust is paramount. There have been, I come at this as a researcher, so there have been some sometimes damaging and sometimes not useful approaches to research. And I'm hoping that we're really thinking deeply about that and doing work differently. So we're doing research with and not on. So maybe if you're doing projects, then you can think about that as doing research with and not on Indigenous nations, peoples, etc. So respect is really important, showing humility, responsibility, so acknowledging harms and working towards reconciliation. This comes from the 4 R's, which has been published, but there are more than 4 R's. Relevance, so is the project relevant? So really thinking deeply about if the project is relevant to the community that you are working with. That relationship piece, again, that comes back to the trust and spending time in community and learning from community and learning together. And then reciprocity, so that's giving and receiving equally. So that in a research setting for me, that's always thinking about not taking from community, but supporting and really thinking deeply about what the community needs are and what they've articulated the needs are. The next slide here, I'll skip over this. This is where I get into the Indigenous strategy here at the university, and I wanted to share some of that with you because I think it might be useful to think about the relationship here. I work with each of the nations that I read to you in the land acknowledgement. The relationship here for me is different than it might be for you wherever you are located. So really thinking about a framework that might work for you, but making sure that you're working on this framework with community and that it's, in my case, it would always be led by an elder or guided by an elder and then takes place in community. So I wanted to show you what this looks like at the University of Calgary. This is just a visual of that. Maybe we can return to that because what I really want to do is read you an elder teaching. So typically elders guide the work that's done in community and with community. And I think this one is relevant because it's about developing policy. And Elder Reg Croshoe, who I'll read from, I'll read you the teaching from, is a Blackfoot elder that guides the University of Calgary strategy. So let me read it to you, and then maybe I wanted you to think about what comes to mind when I'm reading this, what teaching or what part of the teaching is relevant to you? And maybe someone can yell out an answer or two once I'm done if we have time. But let me read this to you. So this is Elder Reg Croshoe, who published and was part and still guides the university, constantly guides the University of Calgary Indigenous strategy. So it's the story of Itapatope, which is the book that I'm reading from, which again is the Indigenous strategy here at the University of Calgary. So I hope I pronounced this correctly. Kima papi tsitsini. And that means sanctified kindness. So this is what Elder Reg Croshoe shares. He says, to me, sanctified kindness is an interpretation of kima pipitsini, to be kind. It's that humility and humbleness to remember that we, all of those in creation, are equal, so that we can safely survive together. And I guess that's where kindness comes in. where we take that humility and even the responsibility of kindness, so that we can be kind to everything. If I wasn't kind to the sweetgrass, and I didn't look after the sweetgrass as part of my responsibility, then the sweetgrass is going to disappear from creation. And when it does, then how are we going to use sweetgrass in our smudge as a call to order? So that would be the concept of kindness, that we sanctify kindness for all. When we call to order to make the smudge, we consider all of creation. This comes from the concept of natural laws, where, as my grandmother taught me, all creation respects and is kind to each other, and that's how we learn then to be kind to ourselves. And the other important thing that I learned as an oral concept is that when I have an idea or a thought, I have to bring it through a smudge process to make it real. I think in Western practice, you might refer to that as developing a policy. It's a thought, and you bring it through a process, and that process gives you direction. So when I come up with a thought, sanctified kindness has got to be part of it, because I've got to bring that kindness to the gathering, to the smudge, because the gathering is the process to validate or to make my thought real. That's the process of sanctified kindness. I bring my thoughts to the gathering, and then we all have the input. Into it and validate it as an idea. And then it becomes real. It becomes validated by the venue and the smudge. Through the smudge and sanctified kindness, I have to consider all my people or all my relatives in the environment so that I'm not harming them. The process of sanctified kindness must give us all survival. It's my responsibility to natural laws to make things real. That's how I view sanctified kindness. How am I doing for time? 2 minutes. Okay, so we have 2 minutes. Any thoughts on what stood out? If somebody is brave enough to yell out what stood out to them in their particular field of work, I'd love to just hear, maybe if you have a really loud voice, to yell out something that really spoke to you through that teaching or through the story. I wrote down 4 last night. Any brave people out there willing to share? Oh, yes, please. Thank you. So I think what I heard was the importance of nature and environment. Thank you. So the fact that we're all relatives, yes, that's absolutely one that I wrote as well. Anyone else? Anything else about the policy piece maybe, or? No? Okay, well, I'll read you mine. So I had consider all of creation, so back to the brave gentleman over there who shared that with us. So considering all of creation and the importance of land, animals, people in decision making. How do we bring that into decision making? To be kind, the sanctified kindness, and the word kind is something that I'm always thinking about. You know, how can we be kind to everything, or as Elder Reg Croce would say, to our relatives? And then the other thought that I thought was fascinating was sanctified kindness gives us all survival. I thought that was something that's really important, and maybe a worldview or a thought or a way that we approach some of the work that we do together. So since I still have another minute, I'll just return to this slide here. So back to the Indigenous strategy here that was developed with elders and with a circle approach. I wanted to share this with you because maybe some kind of a framework that will look different because it depends where you are and the elder that's guiding you and the First Nations that you're working with. It might look very different than this, but I did want to share a little bit about this here. So it's always a cyclical process where it's a journey and exploration, and it's done in a cycle. And what it includes at the university is ways of knowing. And so under ways of knowing is, it's really small here. I'll have to check my slides here. Under ways of knowing is teaching, learning, and research. So that's what falls under the circle of ways of knowing. And maybe your circle will be different that way, guided by community and guided by elders. The next is ways of doing, and ways of doing would include policies, procedures, and practices. And so that's thinking about how do we do this work together in a good way, incorporating policies, procedures, and practices that are led by community. And then ways of connecting are connecting relationships. So going back to that slide, I showed you that trust and the 4 R's, or the more than 4 R's. How do we go about connecting? How do we go about relationships? What do those partnerships look like? What's that connection to land and place and animals and others look like? So that is another circle in our Itapatope, our Indigenous strategy. And then ways of being includes campus identity, inclusivity, leadership, and engagement. And then once that happens, then a certain transformation happens, and then there's renewal, and then we go through it again, just like we would cycle through seasons and that type of approach. So that's a little bit about the framework here. It's called Itapatope, which in Blackfoot means a place to rejuvenate and re-energize during a journey. So I'll leave that there, and then I look forward to connecting back with you later, hopefully.
Thank you, and I'm very honored to be here with such a distinguished group. My career started in 1976 as a lineman. Don't do the math on that, please. It is a little bit of an extended career. I've worked in the utilities, electrical utilities, since then in distribution, transmission, construction, and more recently with AltaLink in the control center as the control center manager. For some of you in Alberta, you know about the Wattle line. I managed the Wattle line for the last few years. And now in this role as the wildfire and safety, the emergency response program manager. Can't even remember my own role. But it's really been a great career and nice to be able to be part of it. I want to talk a little bit about AltaLink as we get going here. So AltaLink is the largest electrical transmission provider in Alberta. It's 100% focused on energy solutions and more than 13,000 kilometers of transmission lines and 310 substations. So, we're really the backbone of the electrical grid here in Alberta and serving about 85% of the load here in Alberta. So it's a significant area, even though it's a small part of the province. As we've been talking about, wildfires are becoming larger and more severe, as you all know. And wildfire activity in Alberta since 2023, there's been more than 3,100 fires reported and 3.57 million hectares burned in that time frame. In terms of damage at AltaLink, we had significant damage in 2023, where required our largest registration effort to date, and we've had a little bit of problems this year as well. On average, less than 10% of the fires have been started by electrical infrastructure. However, there is still a very large risk associated with even 10%. So AltaLink is committed to reducing that likelihood caused by electrical fires, and we've done some things around infrastructure that can contribute to the ignition of catastrophic fires, some of the things we're trying to manage. Things like implementing wildfire mitigation programs that we started in 2019, really the first utility in Alberta and I believe even in Canada. So it's been a thing that we're very proud of. And we continue to enhance and expand the mitigation efforts that we're working on. You see some of those fires in the distance there, in the pictures. This is quite a busy slide, but I'm going to kind of start down at the bottom bottom left-hand side. So Alberta's wildfire mitigation plan is focused on providing communities, protecting communities while providing safe and reliable power, and really the focus on safe and reliable power. So if you go down to the bottom left there, you'll see that some of the things we start with is our fire threat plans and maps. And so we've done a very exhaustive review of our lines in relationship to wildfire risk and really put that in terms of our plans and how we do it. The next thing we do is facility wildfire risk restoration procedures and doing things like strengthening and hardening our lines and really focusing on the areas that are significantly creating risk within our communities and province. So it's really trying to focus the efforts and time and dollars in the areas it should be as much as possible. Next thing we've been doing some focus on is the enhanced situational awareness monitoring. And so using things like enhanced weather forecasting tools and opportunities, putting cameras that have AI technology and capabilities on them so that we can have enhanced reliability and awareness. And it's really getting that intelligence to make the right decisions that we're trying to focus on. The next thing that we're doing, and it's certainly part of the discussion here, is expanding preparedness and the emergency capabilities with our partners, whether those partners are government agencies, emergency services, and our communities. It's very important to get out and talk to those people in advance, get to know who they are, build relationships, and in the cases that we've been involved in, be embedded directly into those situations so that we all have the right intelligence and information and can, jointly work together to come up with solutions. Further, we have incremental operational practices and things like vegetation management in very defined areas that mitigate the risk that are associated with a potential catastrophic fire in those areas. It's important to spend those right dollars in the right locations and having the right frequency and terminology to get that done right. Also, in the enhanced operational procedures, we do have the additional resources and make sure that the assessments are done effectively. So, now, the last thing that we want to get into is what we call our public safety power shutdown. And it's really, as an electrical utility, the last thing you ever want to do is shut the power off. But when it comes to public safety, there's really nothing that we can put people at risk for. There's no reason to do that. So that's why, in 2019, AltaLink started going into the planning and the understanding of the PSPS programs. It's for the safety of our communities and the people involved in those communities. So it's a very important part. So what is a public safety power shutdown? We talked a little bit about it here in the last couple of days, but it's a tool to keep people and communities safe from wildfire, and it's shutting the power off. Let's call it what it is. And so we may proactively shut off power during extreme and dangerous weather conditions that can result in a catastrophic wildfire. So, as you see wind conditions driving embers or driving parts of trees into the air and potentially into our power lines, which could create a spark or a fire, that's what we want to shut those lines off for, to get in those situations that don't ignite those fires. And it's used as a last resort for a preventative measure. And, if it's as, for all of us that are in the utility industry, that we want to keep the power on, but we don't want to put public safety at risk to do that. So that's where this comes into place. And each situation is different, and we have to be engaged with the communities when these situations are occurring so that we get the right intelligence and make the right decisions and be able to communicate to our communities why we're doing it. And that they would agree in those situations that it makes the right sense and it's the right thing to do, even though it's new to them. And that's why we get involved in community service. So we monitor a large range of factors when executing a public safety power shutdown. We look at things like wind conditions, low humidity, dry vegetation, and real-time observations. So the real-time observation is very, very important at the time of a public safety shutdown. We want to be able to have that intelligence to do that. And then also if we have a fire in the vicinity, so a wildfire that's created, what can we do to proactively stay ahead of creating more fire? And in those situations, we'll shut the lines down. We have to be aware and engaged is important to ensure safe and effective response. I talked a little bit about it already, but building preparedness through awareness and public information sessions are key to that. Outreach to customer, government agencies, and emergency leaders is very important. And advertising to share information and promote preparedness. So We've had active campaigns this year and we'll continue later on in the fall. I've been out talking to many community members, and so we want to build that relationship in advance. So building resilience through engagement is key through this, and engagement through mock exercises, it's emergency response exercises, with the municipalities and emergency leaders is going to expand and enhance emergency response plans. So, and we're going to continue ongoing coordination with industry partners as well.